Imagine it is a Tuesday morning in April 2026. You pull into a gas station in suburban America, and the digital display on the pump flickers before settling on $6.87 per gallon for regular unleaded. Your heart does a slow, heavy roll in your chest. You check your phone, and the headlines are screaming in all caps. Total blockade. A single Iranian drone swarm just disabled 2 tankers in the 21-mile-wide stretch of water known as the Strait of Hormuz. You might think a conflict 7,000 miles away in the Persian Gulf has nothing to do with your ability to pay rent in Phoenix or Charlotte. But you would be mathematically wrong. That $85 fill-up just evaporated 42% of your weekly discretionary income in exactly 4 minutes. You aren't just a victim of a geopolitical chess match. You are a failing business, operating on a razor-thin margin that just got sliced in half by a missile strike you can't even see on a map. Welcome to the reality of 2026, where the distance between global catastrophe and personal insolvency has shrunk to zero. My name is Bobby, and if you want to understand how to insulate your life from the coming volatility, you need to hit that subscribe button for Bond Money Mind right now. We don't do vibes here. We do forensic math. Because right now, the average American household is operating with a net profit margin of less than 3%. If you were a publicly traded company on the New York Stock Exchange and you reported a 3% margin while your primary supply line, the global energy market, was under constant threat of a total shutdown, your stock would be delisted by noon. Investors would flee. And yet, that is exactly how you are running your life. Let's look at the raw data of the personal Strait of Hormuz. Every single day, 21 million barrels of oil flow through that tiny choke point. That represents 21% of the entire world's petroleum consumption. When Iran threatens to close that gate, they aren't just threatening the U.S. Navy. They are threatening the cost of the plastic in your toothbrush, the synthetic fibers in your gym clothes, and the literal cost of the electricity keeping your refrigerator running. In 2024, a barrel of oil sat around $80. By early 2026, with tensions escalating to a fever pitch, analysts are projecting a surge to $150. For the average person earning $60,000 a year, that price jump represents a hidden tax of $4,800 annually. That is not a fluctuation. That is a catastrophic loss of capital. But here is where it gets truly insidious. While the U.S. and Iran are fighting over the sovereignty of the seas, you are losing the sovereignty of your own bank account, because you have failed to identify your own personal choke points. Most people look at their finances through the lens of budgeting, which is a loser's game. Budgeting is defensive. Optimization is offensive. If your rent takes up 40% of your income, and your debt service takes up another 20%, and your cost of goods sold, your food and fuel, takes up another 30%, you are left with a 10% margin. In corporate terms, you are one bad quarter away from bankruptcy. A bad quarter in your world isn't a drop in stock price. It's a transmission failure, a medical deductible, or a 10% spike in grocery prices caused by a blockade in the Middle East. We are entering an era of extreme volatility math. The old rules, the ones your parents followed, where you save 5% and hope the S&P 500 carries you to the finish line, are officially dead. They died the moment the supply chain became a weapon of war. You have to start viewing your household as a high-stakes enterprise. If a business has a single point of failure, one supplier, one customer, one shipping route, it is considered high risk. If you have one job and one source of energy, you are the highest risk asset on the market. The conflict in the Strait of Hormuz is a mirror. It shows us that when a system is too tight, too optimized for just-in-time delivery, it becomes fragile. Your life is currently just in time. You get paid on Friday to pay the bills on Saturday. There is no inventory. There is no buffer. You are a failing business, and the world is about to get a lot more expensive. It is time to stop worrying about the headlines and start worrying about your own internal margin before the 2026 collapse makes the choice for you. I'm the guy who stays up until 3 in the morning reading maritime insurance adjuster reports and combing through Department of Energy projections for the next 18 months. My name is Marcus, and I look at the world through a lens of cold, hard math, because emotions don't pay the bills when Brent crude hits $200 a barrel. Most of you are watching the news right now. The headlines about the USS Abraham Lincoln Carrier Strike Group entering the Arabian Sea, or the latest drone footage from the coast of Bandar Abbas. And you're treating it like a geopolitical blockbuster movie. You think it's over there. But I'm here to tell you that the escalating tension between the United States and Iran isn't just a chess match between superpowers. It is a direct, violent assault on your personal balance sheet. If you've been feeling like you're running a marathon in waist-deep water, it's because you are currently operating as a failing business. You have a revenue problem, sure, but more importantly, you have a terminal margin problem that the mainstream financial gurus are completely ignoring. These experts keep telling you to stay the course and invest for the long term, as if the world of 2026 is going to look anything like the world of 2016. They tell you to put 15% of your paycheck into an index fund and wait 40 years. But that advice is based on a world of stable supply chains and cheap energy. It ignores the fact that 21% of the world's total petroleum consumption passes through the Strait of Hormuz, a 21-mile-wide choke point that Iran can effectively turn into a parking lot with a few hundred naval mines and a swarm of fast attack boats. When that happens, the math of your life changes overnight. The experts aren't accounting for the fact that a 40% spike in energy costs doesn't just make it more expensive to fill your tank. It adds a hidden tax to every single item you touch, from the avocado you bought at the grocery store to the electricity powering your laptop. To be fair, traditional financial advisors aren't malicious people. They are operating on a legacy playbook where globalism was the undisputed king, and the Strait of Hormuz was just a line on a map that didn't affect the price of a suburban mortgage. That said, following their slow and steady advice in a high-volatility 2026 environment is like trying to use a map of London to navigate the surface of Mars. It simply doesn't apply to the reality of a world where one kinetic exchange in the Persian Gulf can reset the price of every consumer good in your pantry. Think of your life as a corporation. Your salary is your gross revenue. Your rent, food, and car payments are your cost of goods sold. What's left over is your operating margin. In a healthy business, you want a margin of at least 20 to 30% to survive a market downturn. But the average American household is currently operating on a margin of less than 5%. You are one supply chain disruption, one regional war, or one Hormuz event away from total insolvency. When you look at your bank account and feel that tightening in your chest, that isn't anxiety. It's your internal auditor telling you that your business model is broken. You are trading 40 to 60 hours of your limited human life every week for a currency that is being devalued by the very geopolitical conflicts you see on the evening news. The reality is that you are paying a stability tax that you never agreed to. When the United States Navy has to spend $2 million per interceptor missile to shoot down a $10,000 drone in the Red Sea, who do you think pays for that? It's not just the government. It's you, through the invisible siphon of inflation and the rising cost of credit. We are moving into an era where buying the dip is no longer a viable strategy because the dip is becoming a permanent canyon. If you don't start treating your personal finances with the same forensic ruthlessness that a bankruptcy lawyer treats a failing tech startup, you are going to get crushed by the gears of history. We need to stop talking about saving and start talking about life margin optimization. You have to widen the gap between what you earn and what it costs you to exist. And you have to do it before the first missile flies in 2026. Because once the strait closes, the time for optimization is over and the time for survival begins. You are currently a business with high overhead and zero defensive moat. It is time to change the math before the math changes you. Think about the global economy not as a series of abstract stock tickers, but as a giant, interconnected plumbing system. At the center of this system is a single, narrow pipe called the Strait of Hormuz. It is only 21 miles wide at its narrowest point. Through that tiny gap flows 21 million barrels of oil every single day. That is roughly 20% of the entire world's daily petroleum consumption. If a single chess piece moves incorrectly in 2026 and that pipe gets clogged, the global blood pressure doesn't just rise. The entire organism goes into cardiac arrest. This is the ultimate example of a single point of failure. And here is the aha moment you need to swallow. Most of you are living your lives exactly like that 21-mile-wide choke point. You have built a personal economy that relies on a 100% success rate just to stay solvent. In the world of corporate logistics, we call this just-in-time manufacturing. It was pioneered by Toyota to eliminate waste. The idea is simple. Don't keep a warehouse full of parts. Have the parts arrive at the factory exactly when you need to bolt them onto the car. On paper, it is a masterpiece of efficiency. It maximizes profit because you aren't paying for storage. But in reality, it is a suicide pact with stability. If one truck carrying steering wheels gets a flat tire, the entire multi-billion-dollar assembly line grinds to a halt. You are doing the exact same thing with your life margin. You have just-in-time finances. Your paycheck arrives on Friday, and by Friday at 6:01 p.m., 98% of it is already allocated to the mortgage, the car note, the streaming services, and the grocery bill. You have zero warehouse space. You have no inventory of capital. You are a business running on a 2% profit margin, while the cost of your raw materials, food, energy, and housing is subject to a 40% volatility spike the moment a drone hits a tanker in the Persian Gulf. To be fair, the just-in-time model is the reason we enjoyed 2 decades of incredibly cheap consumer goods and high-speed delivery. It allowed companies to scale at a pace that was previously impossible, and it gave the average consumer access to luxury items at basement prices. That said, that era of efficiency over resilience is officially dead. The math of 2026 doesn't care about your efficiency. It only cares about your redundancy. If the US and Iran escalate and the price of a gallon of gas hits $7, your just-in-time life doesn't just get more expensive, it goes bankrupt. Think about your monthly budget like a corporate profit and loss statement. If a company has $100 million in revenue, but $99 million in expenses, that company is one bad week away from liquidation. That is you. You are a failing business because your life margin is thinner than the paint on a 2026 fighter jet. While the world's superpowers are fighting over the physical Strait of Hormuz, you are losing the war over your own internal Strait of Hormuz. The gap between what you earn and the absolute minimum you need to survive. If that gap is less than 15%, you aren't a free citizen. You are a high-risk asset waiting for a market correction. We need to look at the forensic math of your daily existence. If global shipping costs rise by 300%, which they did during the height of past supply chain crises, how many days of inventory do you actually have in your bank account? For the average American, the answer is less than 19 days. You are running a global-scale operation with a backyard-scale safety net. The superpowers understand that he who controls the flow controls the world. But you have handed over the flow of your life to creditors and just-in-time consumption habits. You are paying a fragility tax every single day. Every time you buy something on credit, you are narrowing your personal Strait of Hormuz. You are making your internal plumbing more susceptible to the slightest tremor in global oil prices. The goal isn't just to have more money. The goal is to increase your economic bandwidth. You need to move away from the just-in-time life and back to a just-in-case architecture. Because when the big gears of the world start grinding against each other in the Middle East, the small gears, the individual households with zero margin, are the first ones to have their teeth stripped. You have to stop viewing your bank account as a transit station and start viewing it as a strategic reserve. If you don't have a 20% margin, you aren't making it. You are just a business that hasn't realized it's insolvent yet. Examine the 21-mile-wide choke point that is the Strait of Hormuz. It handles roughly 20 to 30% of the world's total oil consumption every single day. If 2026 brings a kinetic conflict in that region, we aren't just talking about a headline on a news crawl. We are talking about a mathematical reset of your personal net worth. When oil surges past $145 a barrel, the cost of every gallon of milk, every plastic component, and every commute to your 9-to-5 increases by a factor of 1.4. Your business, which is your household, is already operating on a razor-thin margin of roughly 3 to 5%. If your costs increase by 40% while your revenue or salary stays flat, you aren't just struggling, you are mathematically insolvent. You are running a deficit that no amount of side hustling can fix because the macro environment is working against your microeconomics. Look at the consumer debt statistics with a cold, forensic eye. In the United States, total credit card debt has surpassed $1.1 trillion. The average interest rate on those cards is hovering around 21.5%. Compare that to the U.S. Treasury's own debt servicing costs. The system is designed to keep you in a state of perpetual debt refinancing. You are essentially a subsidiary of your bank, working 40 hours a week just to pay the interest on the seed capital you used to buy a car or a college degree. To be fair, the global financial infrastructure has allowed millions of people to access credit that was previously unavailable, enabling home ownership and entrepreneurship for those without initial family capital. This liquidity has been the primary engine of the American middle class for the better part of a century. On the other hand, the cost of that access has now reached a tipping point, where the interest payments are cannibalizing the very growth they were meant to foster. Analyze the housing-to-income ratio if you want to see the real failure in the business model of modern life. In 1970, the median house price was roughly double the median household income. Today, in many metropolitan areas, that ratio is 7-to-1. If you were a real-world corporation and your primary asset cost 7 times your annual revenue, your stock would be downgraded to junk status immediately by any reputable analyst. Yet, we expect individuals to carry this burden, while the global supply chain is one drone strike away from a 50% hike in shipping costs. We are entering an era of forensic survival. You have to look at your bank statement like a P&L sheet under a hostile takeover. Every subscription you don't use, every high-interest loan you carry, and every inefficient commute is a leak in your hull. While the U.S. and Iran play a high-stakes game of chicken with the world's energy supply, you are the one paying the risk premium. The inflation you see at the grocery store isn't just a byproduct of bad policy. It's a direct tax on your lack of self-sufficiency. Consider this. If you're spending 40% of your income on rent and 20% on debt service, you have zero R&D budget for your own life. You have no capital to invest in new skills, no margin to pivot when the market shifts, and no emergency fund to act as a buffer. You are a stagnant company waiting for a market crash to go bankrupt. This is the reality of 2026. The geopolitical landscape isn't just a backdrop. It's the primary competitor for your remaining dollars. Contrast your situation with a lean, optimized startup. They cut every unnecessary expense to extend their runway. Your runway is the amount of time you can survive if your income stops tomorrow. For the average American, that runway is less than 30 days. If the Strait of Hormuz closes, that runway shrinks to 15. You are being squeezed from the top by global conflict and from the bottom by systemic inefficiency. To survive, you must stop thinking like a consumer and start acting like a turnaround CEO. You have to cut the unprofitable divisions of your lifestyle before the math of your life becomes truly impossible to solve. Every dollar you pay in interest is a dollar you've surrendered to the system. Every hour you spend in a car you can't afford is an hour you aren't building your own exit strategy. The numbers don't lie. And right now, the numbers are screaming that your current business model is unsustainable. You need to ruthlessly optimize your life margin before the global economy forces a liquidation you aren't prepared for. Look, I realize that looking at a map of the Persian Gulf while your own checking account is bleeding out feels like a cruel joke. But the math of 2026 doesn't care about your feelings. It only cares about your margin. If the Strait of Hormuz sees even a 15% reduction in daily tanker flow, the global supply chain doesn't just slow down. It imposes a direct tax on your specific existence. We are moving toward a reality where the poor tax isn't just a sociological theory. It is a literal, measurable line item on your utility bill and your grocery receipt. You have to understand that as a household, most of you are currently operating like a failing legacy corporation. You have high fixed overhead, zero research and development for your own skills, and your primary supplier, the global energy market, is currently negotiating a price hike that could hit 40% by next year. To survive this, you have to become a bad customer for the system and a ruthless chief financial officer for your own life. This transformation starts with what I call the liquidity rebellion. Most financial gurus want you to take your last $500 and throw it into a volatile index fund so they can clip a management fee while you pray for a 7% return. I am telling you that in a pre-conflict economy, that $500 is 10 times more powerful as a friction killer. If you spend that money today to fix a thermal leak in your home, or to buy non-perishables in bulk before the 2026 shipping spikes hit, you aren't just saving pennies. You are generating a 30 to 50% internal rate of return by avoiding the future scarcity premium. Every time you eliminate a recurring vampire cost, whether it is a high-interest credit card balance or a fuel-inefficient commute, you are buying back the cognitive bandwidth that the system is trying to steal from you. Remember that 13-point IQ drop we discussed? That is the system's greatest weapon. It wants you too tired, too stressed, and too broke to calculate the exit. It wants you reacting to the headlines instead of auditing your own balance sheet. But you are watching this, which means you are already looking for the door. You are starting to see that the conflict between the United States and Iran isn't just about drones and tankers. It is about who pays the ultimate bill for the transition to a new world order. If you don't want that person to be you, you need to subscribe to Bond Money Mind right now. We aren't here to give you feel-good platitudes about saving for a rainy day or cutting out lattes. We are here to provide the forensic tools and the cold, hard data you need to build a fortress around your family's future before the gates of Hormuz swing shut. Hit that subscribe button because the 2026 economy will not be kind to the distracted. It will only be kind to the prepared. This journey is inherently unfair. I won't lie to you and say the playing field is level. The system is designed to make the first $10,000 of stability feel like climbing Everest, while the next $100,000 feels like a stroll in the park. The wind is blowing directly in your face right now. But once you accept that being failing business in a volatile world is a mathematical penalty you can opt out of, the entire game changes. You stop being a victim of the headlines, and you start becoming a sovereign entity. You buy the high-quality boots, metaphorically and literally. You buy the freedom to say no to predatory loans, no to convenience traps, and no to the fear-mongering of the 24-hour news cycle. You stop playing their game of debt and distraction, and you start playing your own game of margin and math. Share this video with one person who is still sleepwalking through this economic shift. We need to stop talking about the wins of the billionaire class and start talking about the survival strategies of the informed individual. You have the data. You have the strategy. Now, you need the discipline to execute. Thank you for trusting me with your time. Build your buffer, protect your margin, and I will see you in the next analysis.